Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMann Ransford, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth, and the Consultants Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMann and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employer, company, or affiliated organizations.
Welcome back to the Consultants Way podcast. Today we're doing a special episode, and instead of joined by Dean McMann, I have Jackie McMann with me, and I'm Anthony Paluska. Jackie and I both just got back from a week in Orlando at the TSIA Interact Conference, and lots of energy, lots of conversation, lots of insights and learnings, both from what they were talking about in their focus areas, but then also from all of the different conversations that we had along the way. So I'm excited to do a little bit of a debrief here and see if we can distill some key takeaways that are actually relevant for anybody that wasn't able to participate in that. So Jackie, excited to have you.
Excited to be here. It sounds like you traded out for the better McMann. Just don't tell
That's what we're going to tell him for sure.
Younger at least.
Yeah. Great. So for the audience probably doesn't know you and your focus area, Jackie's also a partner at McMann Ransford, our consulting arm. And while we both focus on growth, right, largely and trying to drive revenue growth for large companies, my lens tends to be more through the professional services and how do we expand and add more value-added services. Jackie, you want to spend a second on your focus area and your practice, although we just overlap so much.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of overlap in what we do, but I tend to focus more on what the commercial team is doing to drive that growth. So I work really closely with CROs, sales teams, but account management, business development, a little bit of customer success as well, to really, look at the horizontal or the vertical line of the TSIA revenue cross, right? Getting new logos and the upsells and the cross sells. So that's where I like to focus.
Well, and so TSIA was the perfect kind of combination for both of us as a conference perspective, because for those that don't know, right, Technology Services Industry Association, it's the leading tech service providers in the country or across the globe. And most of them are members. They do a ton of research on it. They've got a lot of perspective. So you get a lot of that represented, but they are focused on service optimization. And then they're focused on how do we grow services. And they're very focused on, and I think we're going to talk about this, right? This increased pressure on renewals and what are organizations having to do about it? So it's a nice fit.
This was my first TSIA conference, actually. And so I don't have, like you do, I can't compare it to past ones, but there was a heavy emphasis on renewals, even a lot of conversations about software renewals as well. That fits nicely with the services because it's usually attached. But those were some of the really interesting conversations I was a part of.
Yeah. And the overarching theme, I would say this year was, not surprisingly, right, AI and AI's role in literally everything that touches services. And so I think that'll bleed through some of this conversation. So we'll try and spend half an hour or so and hit a couple of our key highlights. I've got some key points I want to mention. I know you do as well. We talked quite a bit trying to catch the plane home yesterday, but I figured we can organize it a little bit better. So, all right, let's start with this. So kind of your first conference, your first time spending 3 days with all of these tech leaders all in one room. What was your key takeaway from the conference?
Oh, I could take that in a bunch of different directions, but the way that you teed that up, I mean, my key takeaway was really these tech leaders, in a lot of cases, they are at the cutting edge with their own technology. They are embedding AI specifically into their own technology, and they feel a lot of pressure to also be figuring out first how to use that AI internally. And spoiler alert, very few have it figured out. A lot of experimentation, a lot of hesitancy,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so that was it's a fairly obvious thing, but it was just so evident. Not only the desire to figure it out, but the pressure that they feel, right? They're the ones that really should and should be the first adopters and everything. So that was great. Also, there was, a lot of talk about what other kind of external pressures are affecting different business models right now. And I think one thing I've been hearing constantly in my circles that was really reiterated at this conference is the pressure for software companies specifically to prove value to their customers, and how much pressure CFOs are putting on each individual line item that they're paying for right now, and wanting to understand what's the ROI. And so everyone's really in competition with each other to prove not only is my software the most valuable thing that you're paying for against a competitors, but against any software, especially in the sales space, anything else that you could be using, right? Because they don't want to use 10 things anymore. They want to figure out the 3.
Yeah, yeah. Your first point on that was, it was funny. We just had conversations anecdotally throughout the session, and I can't tell you the most common thing, right? So and I want to talk about the opening keynote and how Thomas addressed this kind of business model change that's happening and some of the forces against it. And so, right, you have all of these organizations that say, oh, the topic's AI, and TSIA has been publishing a lot of information on AI and what needs to be done for it. You as an individual are now responsible for going to the conference and figuring out what the leading edge and the best practices are. And then the conference kicks off with Thomas Law, the executive director at TSIA, kind of walking through okay, here's the forces, and here's what AI is actually going to do, and here's how people are implementing it. And then Salesforce came up and talked about agentic AI and some of the things they're implementing. And after that, the combination of, okay, I was sent here with this mandate, and then I sat through this session. I feel like I am so far behind every other organization. And then you start talking to enough of them, and if everybody feels like they're behind, then okay, nobody's really behind. We're in the early innings of trying to figure a lot of this stuff out. But it was funny how throughout the conference, right, there was this like rise of, you could feel the anxiety of everybody that was there that said, oh my gosh, I have to solve this while I'm here because everyone else seems to have it figured out. And then by the time you get to the end of it, everybody kind of looked around and was like, oh, okay, like we're all sort of in this together, and we're all experimenting in different ways, and we'll see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, I think it's no surprise that a lot of people are falling behind Salesforce, right? I mean, they really are going to be the leader, not only in using that internally, but in embedding it into. So them being a keynote early on, showing just the full magic of what they're putting out there and what they're using, might have made people feel like they had a lot of catching up to do. But I think in the breakout sessions, it was clear we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think, and just to kind of put a bow on the key takeaway, my big thing, and I wrote it down in my notes like maybe 3 or 4 times throughout the entire session, and I don't really have the answer to it, but I'm curious your thoughts on it, which is every conversation where somebody was talking about the application of technology and AI into solving a problem. And a lot of it was customer support initially, right? That there's some low hanging fruit there. There's some other things around some of the customer success and some of the information. But then, like, as you get further and further along into doing some of the delivery work, it's still earlier. But no matter what we were listening to, the big things that I kept hearing and I kept writing down is, okay, are we, and TSIA uses this term over rotating, and so I'll pick on it because I just heard it a lot, but like, are we over rotating or over solving for the efficiency and what we deem as like the measurable customer experience pieces of things? So like zero wait and hold time and immediate access to answers through an AI chatbot online and all of these different things. Are we trading off too much of trying to solve that problem in exchange for building customer intimacy and truly understanding what the customer's solving that kind of lives in between the lines and doesn't really come out as part of an explicit question, but it would take not just answering the question, but a bunch of follow-up questions to understand, well, why are you trying to solve this? And how does that actually work? And in the short term, I think that's a win because it does get us more efficient and it does solve these things. But this, long term, if we completely move away from trying to have meaningful interactions with our customers, what are the long-term risks of that? How do we make sure that we understand what their true needs are, that we're staying out in front of them, that we're designing the right solutions, that through our professional services engagements, we are actually solving for not just the use cases that they say, because we know that customers don't always know what they need when they're buying. They just know some of the symptoms. They don't know the root cause behind it. And that's, I think, our role as partners and as vendors and as everybody to help inform them. Okay, you want to do this. You think it looks like that, but actually the real solution requires X, Y, and Z. And there's going to be lots to figure it out, but there's a little bit of a change in the mindset. And I kept writing, okay, what's the risk of us just like completely moving away from trying to engage and build those intimate relationships with our customers?
It's really funny you say that, because I've actually, been on that topic a little bit of how it relates to, the sales side and the account management side, and that the intersection point of the conference was the customer success. And then you were in different sessions really focused on PS. So I'm interested if you had the same takeaway. But I've started to see almost two camps emerge, right? There's the one on the sales side that's saying, all right, how can we, move towards seller-free B2B sales engagements? It's AI talking to AI, right? And how can we completely take the human element out of it? And there's a lot of energy around that. And then there's a whole different camp that's looking for how AI can just help their humans be more effective, right? And I actually do think that in general, you might see that kind of two-track mindset continue for a while and create new business models where you've got really low cost options. I'm thinking about from the consumer or the customer standpoint. When you're evaluating your options, you've got the really low cost sales, account management, and service delivery model, or you've got a white glove that still has humans involved, right?
It's sad that white glove it just means that there's a human involved in the process.
White glove means there's someone that might actually pick up the phone if you have an issue, right? So I don't know. I don't know if you see that on the PS side as much as like these two camps are actually emerging, and it might actually lead to two different models here, or what?
Well, I don't know if they're that far along yet. So PS, I sat through a session, and they had just done a big study on AI and professional services. And professional services seems to be the laggard of all of the different groups that were represented in at the conference. And so, right, I think they had a study that said, okay, 50% or more of all PS organizations that were surveyed were still in the early exploration days of professional services. And most of them, I think it was like a number was like 70% or something like that, says, well, we actually don't have any PS AI strategy in place. So even this early exploration is exploration without really direction, so to speak. And they tie it back to a topic I've been on for a little bit, which is like, okay, you actually don't know what your PS strategy is. So therefore you can't have an AI strategy. Is our PS strategy to grow revenue and to increase stickiness and to do this? Or is it a necessary evil because all we care about as an organization is product revenue, and this low cost, low touch, get in, get out PS mindset is the right thing to do for what they're driving? That would then inform your AI strategy, which could do all these other things. And they're not there. So I don't know if it's broken up into those two camps yet, because nobody's really put a stake in the ground and said, well, this is where we're headed. And I think that, and maybe we'll touch on this later, but I think this comes to this other inflection point that's happening in the market, which was part of the discussion this week as well, which is, hey, does your company actually like services revenue? And if it does, then you're going to use AI in a lot different way. And you're going to think about your PS organization and the growth of that in a lot different way. But if it doesn't like services revenue because it's dilutive and all the things that we've heard for years and years, well, you're going to view this entire transformation totally differently.
I've got to ask you though, because you talked to quite a bit of PS leaders and services leaders in general across the conference. And that question, does your company like services revenue? 50-50? I mean, is it leaning towards, we actually try to avoid? I mean, what were you seeing?
It's funny. It's actually probably like 70% don't like it, 30% do like it, in terms of people that I talk to. But then you take all these other data points, and that number doesn't really make sense, right? So, I mean, if I was just like polling the audience of people that I talk to, I would say it comes into this 70-30. But a couple of things that play into that. One is in one of the sessions they showed this chart of the top 50 technology companies, and they broke out their revenue over the past 10 years, I think it was, into product revenue or services revenue. And product revenue, despite what maybe everybody would think, has actually, if you look across all 50, has actually kind of wobbled a little bit, but it stayed relatively flat over the past 10 years. And services revenue began almost 1-to-1 with product revenue, and now it's 3x. And so it's been this line straight up and to the right. And so you might not care about services revenue, but it's certainly a meaningful portion of your business at this point, and unwinding some of that becomes incredibly difficult. I mean, think about all the legacy product companies that we've worked with over the years that, like, their biggest revenue driver, they will give away the equipment to secure the managed services revenue, the professional services revenue, the break fix, whatever it is, and services revenue goes up and product revenue actually kind of tapers off over time, because that's just the direction they shifted, even though they were initially innovators. So that was an interesting kind of counterpoint to the anecdotes that I picked up on. The other one was everybody that I would talk to that's in services, and I didn't directly ask, like, does your company like services revenue, but, what's your mandate? And most of them are, hey, we need to take cost out. We need to get more efficient with our services. And so, okay, I say, why? And most of them were like, well, our customers want us to do more. And then I talked to somebody else, and they're like, well, the senior leadership actually wants services to grow. And then I, as somebody in PS, actually would be encouraged and motivated to expand my service portfolio and do more and move from implementation to optimization, maybe even ultimately to advisory services. But okay, so if all three of those things are true, then why, and service revenue in the tech industry is growing, like, okay, well, why are you focused on just the cost side of the equation instead of the revenue growth and expansion side of things? And nobody had a good answer for that. So it's an interesting time where I think we feel like we're one thing and we're being asked to do one thing, but all the signals and indicators point us in a different direction. And maybe we just haven't all latched onto that direction yet.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I don't know how much of that has to do, it's like a chicken or the egg with, like, what topic is TSIA on? Therefore, what are the people focused on that are in the room, or vice versa? And obviously, I know that the association does a really good job of staying close to the market, understanding what they're on, and then having the sessions and the keynotes and everything actually reflect that. But I do wonder if there's a bit of like a sample size bias or something that's happening there with the side that says, nope, this is just margin, low cost. How do we get more efficient in our delivery and everything? Because just you didn't join a lot of the sales sessions, but on the sales side, I noticed they tried to apply that same mindset. There was a business development session where TSIA was really focused on, okay, how are companies trying to be more efficient in sales? How are they trying to make their SDRs more efficient and everything? And so they'd done a survey, and they were so surprised to see results like, 50% of respondents say that they're already using some form of AI agent in their processes today. They would have thought that for some reason they had the mindset that sales would be a laggard, but they're really focused on what is the efficiency play here? What are they trying to do to make their salespeople more efficient? And me and a couple other people in the room that live in sales, we're sitting there, we're thinking it's about effectiveness. I mean, that's really, there's efficiency, but a lot of what's happening in sales, the exploration is, how do we increase our conversion rates and how do we get more effective? But TSIA wasn't on that topic, and so they didn't get that data. I do wonder, even on the other sides where they are a lot more, their research goes a lot deeper, if there is a little bit of, they're not on the topic of how to use AI and data to get closer to your customers through services, and therefore that's not what it's spitting out.
Yeah, it's Yeah, you might be right. Right, there might just be a little bit of a bias towards TSIA has been focused on this side of things, and they probably are because their customers are asking about that sort of thing. You might also have a little bit of the. It was an interesting comment, and it's self evident that now that I've heard it, but they explained this concept. I think they called it the AI two step. But the point is, okay, you see all this news of layoffs and things like this that are specific to AI, right? Or tech organizations, everybody is just laying people off for these things. And the natural reaction to that is, oh, they are getting efficiencies out of AI, therefore they can lay these people off. And what the reality of it is, based on all the data and all the information that they have, is actually no. Oh, you want to invest in AI? Well, you need to fund that. And so you need to reduce headcount in advance of making those technology investments so that you can actually go and then invest in the AI to hopefully get the return out of it that you're looking for. And so it's possible that both on the sales side and the PS side, they're focused on how do we take cost out of this so that we could ultimately fund some of the things that maybe they actually want to fund, which is some of the growth aspects of it, some of the top line improvements. So that it might just be, it might not be a two step, it might be a three step, which is we need to lay people off labor so that we can get cost efficiencies, so that we can invest in AI that will then drive out long-term cost efficiency. And once we've done that, we can reinvest that money into actually growing top line associated with it. And I don't know, maybe that's just hopeful, but
No,
that
I think you could
I don't know
absolutely.
how it couldn't.
And there's a point in time aspect of all of that, right? I mean, companies are under cost pressure right now. Like, let's just be honest, right? There's not a lot of disposable budget to focus on growth when, I live in the SaaS world and talk to software companies all the time when they're hemorrhaging customers and just really trying to focus on, retaining as much as they have right now. So anything that they want to pay for, they really need to, cut headcount to be able to find that budget to do it. Unlike, in some years with the software where, selling like hotcakes and they were really able to reinvest in, the newest tools. So no, I think that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah, so the pressure on the SaaS companies and just you say hemorrhaging customers at the moment, there was a big focus on this concept of renewals just declining, right? Churn rate increasing for all these organizations, and part of it was their beliefs on it was okay. We're laying people off. And so there are fewer and fewer people that are in these organizations. And if we're on a usage based pricing model, then a number of users, then you're moving in that direction. And that's where you're headed.
Yeah, well, I think it's two things, right? So you see, kind of like average deal size, if you want to like think about it that way, and the usage base or even the license base, right? User based, right?
Yeah.
As their headcount goes down, the average revenue and share of wallet per customer goes down alongside it. But there's also people that, especially non-enterprise, non-platform type softwares that are looking at anything ancillary and being like, maybe we don't need this right now, and completely dropping as a customer, not just reducing their overall usage, right? And so I think both of those things are kind of happening at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to wrap up here shortly, but one more thing, because you and I were kicking it around a little bit because it came up so many times, and maybe this is unique to this group, right? More so than just the market sentiment, because this is the first time we've run into this. But this topic of, hey, we have bad sales to delivery handoffs, right? It just broke. It was such a common topic. It showed up in everything like that. As we talked about it, right? That might not be the whole story. It might not actually just be a sales to delivery handoff, which like I would hope that in a large part we've solved it, at least a little bit, or at least we recognize the problem enough that we could solve it. I don't know, as you went through that, how much that surprised you, or what reaction you had to that.
Well, I think our conversation about it is actually like a microcosm of the conversations happening between sales and PS people at all of their organizations, right? Where I'm saying, hey, I mean, hey, we just need a couple phone calls. I'll get you whatever information that you need. Like, what's what's so complex about this handoff? And I'm coming from a sales perspective of like, can we just do it as efficiently as possible, right? And you were able to help me understand, like, it's actually not just about, what information at the point it needs to flows from sales to PS, but there's the other side of that flow, how PS can be a part of the sales process to help shape the scope and make sure that what's eventually being sold is actually something that they can deliver on meaningfully for the customer. Right. And so, I mean, it was kind of an eye-opening moment for me, as I'm sure it would be for most salespeople, to say, okay, this isn't, this kind of messy handoff isn't just about how efficiently can we get them what they need so we can go back to our job and go back to the next sales call and move on. But, really, actually, if we want to be customer centric, thinking about what's the best thing for them and knowing that PS has some of those answers that we might not have. Right. And so it was actually a nice learning moment for me. So I appreciate, Anthony, you representing, what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, good. All right. So any final things that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we hit on?
There's one topic that came up a lot in the journey to adopt AI that I found was really interesting, and that was data hygiene. So first of all, companies that sell AI embedded products, you guys might all know this, but one of the number one objections that you hear when going to going to prospects and pushing these products that are going to be built on their data is they feel like they don't have enough data. Their data is not clean enough. It's being used by companies everywhere to essentially put off going down that road. And there's huge efforts happening right now to clean up data. That's like a given. I sat through one session where I actually heard someone say, like, this data hygiene thing is a complete myth. I audibly gasped. I grabbed him afterwards and I told him, data hygiene matters. I know this. I've been there. I've seen the garbage in, garbage out is very real. But he highlighted something really interesting. He was like, hygiene matters. Not having bad or wrong data matters. But a lot of times people are worried about the quantity of data that they have. And do they have enough? And, is it going to be enough to feed an AI model to really make real changes? And that's where he was kind of calling BS. He was like, you could do a lot with a little. And you build that over time. Do not use that as an excuse not to start exploring, not to start trying. And so I thought that was a really interesting way to think about data hygiene. I think about it as quality, but quantity is a big part of that as well. And so, that's another piece where people are on both sides of the coin. They're the ones being, shot down by customers because of their data quality, while also internally, it's the reason why their leaders haven't made the big investments either. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That line of data hygiene is a myth. I know it stuck with you because you were talking about it.
Couple curse words in that.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I wish you'd used them. It would have been entertaining here. All right. So that was a good final topic that I did not have because I was not in that session. Any parting words of wisdom or comments to the audience at large about, okay, hey, I run one of these organizations. I lead a sales function. I'm the chief customer officer. I'm the professional services, whatever, right? Anything that would be useful, or that you would say, hey, this was a big takeaway for me. If you weren't there, keep this in mind.
I think it's clear that things are changing, and they're changing rapidly. And so I just don't be the ones to sit on your hands right now and wait till your competitors figure it out, or wait to see where the market heads. I mean, now's the time. I keep using the word exploration or exploring. I think that's what today now should be about, right? It doesn't need to be a giant investment in a AI agent that's replacing your SDRs or anything like that quite yet. But I mean, at least thinking about on the data-driven decision-making side, really get in there and start exploring what options that you have. A lot of people are building their own stuff internally. There's a million different, cool tools out there, but now is the time to explore. And that's going to, help you stay really just in line with your competition. I don't even know if I can promise you'll stay ahead of your competition.
Yeah. I think mine on that topic would be, and this happens with any technological wave, and we our firm, right, we sit kind of next to this problem all the time. And AI is just an extreme version of that, I think. And that is, there's actually not, I don't believe, and sat through a bunch of things, there's not going to be a silver bullet, magic bullet, whatever it is, to solve the problem where you can just say, hey, this perfect tool came along and now all of these problems get solved. And so I sat through 2 sessions, and one, they were both on this topic of better internal integration to lead to better customer outcomes. And it was all about, to your point, right? Okay, let's feed a lot of your data in here. Let's get customer health scores. Let's get all the information about this interaction that a professional services person had, so that the salesperson knows what to say, so that the customer success person, and ties all that together into a cohesive, customer-centric story. And in theory, that sounds really great. And I actually think that's going to be a huge enabler. But technology and the AI, the tools alone, are just that. They're enablers. They have to be surrounded by good fundamental processes and things like that. And so as I took that, I kind of wrote down a couple of things that, okay, if that's at the core and that's what you're buying, a couple of things to think about and to make sure, right? Okay, are your incentive structures aligned to actually support and facilitate some of those things? We've given CS, PS, sales all growth targets. Well, now that information comes in. Now, okay, who's acting on them and what are we chasing and how do we prioritize certain things over another? Another one is around account level decision rights. So who within your organization has the right to say, we actually are going to go talk to this customer about this now, or that got heard. Do I have the particular decision rights to go after and chase a professional services opportunity, or does the account executive have rights over how does that fit into a broader software sale? So, okay, what are the rights amongst all of those things? Another one is like, what data is actually useful? If you're out there delivering or implementing in your professional services team and you're hearing things all the time, what are you plugging into the system? Like, what is it? Like, actually defining what information is useful, because you run the risk of only getting the data in that the team feels like is useful. The same thing that we have now, where, hey, there's all this known information and the sales team's flying blind because nobody ever provided it to them. Well, it's not because there wasn't a system to allow them to get that information from point A to point B. It's because, I didn't actually know that was a relevant data point for this other department within my organization, especially when we have multiple different products and product teams and professional services teams. So, okay, do we even know what information's helpful and how do we define that? Another one's on offer clarity and organizational capabilities. So if a salesperson's out there, you hear this a lot, especially when PS evolves into more optimization services or advisory services or doing some things beyond this. Like, okay, PS lives as this black box out there. And so we can do all of these great things, but nobody gets us involved in them, even though the customer pain points exist, because we don't know how to describe them. We don't know what we actually can do or can't do. So even if we can put it all into a single system, if we don't know what our organization is capable of and we can't clearly define our offers to enable all the different functions to represent that when they do hear something, then we're going to miss those opportunities all the same. And then finally, it's account, segment, and stakeholder prioritization still really matters. So despite all of this information being in there, okay, where are we actually trying to grow and how are we going to deliberately make sure that we get the right people from all of these different functions in line to focus on those accounts that matter? And your big enterprise accounts, self-evident, right? But sometimes it's not quite as clear, the maybe the 3 or 4 dimensional view of this, which is how big is that account for us today and how important are they? How likely are they to grow? What's their current sentiment or health of us? And then what else is going on within a given project or engagement that we might be working on? And you take all those things together, we should know which ones are important to us, and we should have a methodology for doing that. And there's tools to help, but the tools alone don't define that's an important stakeholder for you. That it just tells you that once you've got those rules in place, you can do that. So it's kind of like, make sure that you don't discount all of the things that have to wrap around the tool to actually make it work, or you're going to end up going down a path of buying something thinking it's going to solve your problem, or building something thinking it's going to address something for you, and you're going to find yourself that you didn't actually make as much progress as you had hoped. It's just more information than you had before. So, all right. Well, that was a bit long-winded as a key takeaway there, but I feel very strongly that we are losing the all of the wrapper that goes around this tool and this tool set. And a lot of these organizations can help and will claim to help and will do these, but we're kind of looking at it like from different vantage points. And from an enterprise perspective, very few are buying at that level, much less kind of making organizational decisions that span across all of these different functions that may or may not even touch a customer. So, all right, I think we've done enough on this topic. If out there you enjoyed this and you want to hear more stuff like this, let us know. We'd be happy to do more kinds of special episodes like this. We'll get back to the regular interview episodes here very soon. But if this is the first time listening to something, like, subscribe, share, YouTube, podcast channels, all of those things. You can find Jackie or myself or Dean, who will be back next time on our LinkedIn pages, respective LinkedIn pages. And if you have any questions, comments about this, or you want to go deeper on any of these topics that we covered, you can always email us at podcast@consultantsway.com. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.